Welcome to the Raging Heart On podcast. We're here to get raw and real and talk about all these fucking feelings. And today we're going to talk about these fucking feelings with Camarion. And we've been planning to do this podcast for quite a while now. She finally got some time. So Camarion, would you introduce yourself? Let everybody know what an important person you really are in our state and to our little LGBTQ community here.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for Brian for one, working with my schedule, and two, for the invitation that you have afforded me to share in this dialogue, since we're going to be raw, and everybody know I like being raw. Okay, you understand. So for the world that may not know me, my name is Carmarion D. Anderson Harvey. I do use the she series pronouns. For my role, what pays the bills, as I like to say, and where my passion is, I work for the National Office of the Human Rights Campaign. I serve as the Alabama State Director, and in this role, just to sum it up, my job is to do what I can to move LGBTQ equality across the state of Alabama. And so that's anything from electoral legislation, whether that's state or municipal, community, and you just name it. The other lash that I wear, I am clergy, and that's why we can get raw about it. I'm neo-Pentecostal. I like to say that because there are some things from being from the South. My skin tone is caramel macchiato, which means I'm Black, which means that, I leaned in, and I am one of the clergies and also one of the Christians that despite getting hurt in the church, I leaned in and kept hold to my faith because I knew that there was another message that they weren't preaching, which sums up to really just love and acceptance. Among other things that I do, for the sake of change and visibilities, I'm quite honored to be in the place that I am in and the role that I am afforded to offer. At the end of the day, I am loyal to the work. And I will never be loyal to an institution because lives are at stake. And I need for them to tell me how they want to be fostered, healed, supported. And then I take that and become the advocate inside the institution to make sure that happens. And so that's just a little bit about me.
Well, I am excited to have, I went to seminary. I grew up a little Pentecostal boy and went to seminary, and I would say, come on, who stole my Honda and tied my bow tie? There's a lot of trauma that people, that we in therapy for today from the church. But yeah, I think our openness to spirituality growing up made us acceptable to some of that hurt. And I think our deep faith led to some of that trauma, because I know for me as a child, like if the church said it, I believed it until I found out they didn't believe it. And it was really difficult for me, but
or it was misinterpreted. I mean, you got to unpack it a little bit. It could be misinterpreted. Anytime, and I grew up in the church, Black church. My dad was a bishop. I'm Pentecostal. I belong to the largest Pentecostal denomination on the Mellon side. And one of the things that I realized growing up or being reared in church and having a call so early, I had two calls. I had call to ministry, meaning my call to ministry was not to duplicate the call I saw my father and mother in ministry do, or yet alone equivalent to my twin brother when we accepted our call together. But my call was really, as the Bible said in the New Testament, for those other sheep that are not of this fold. And I interpret that as those that will not show up, those that have been ostracized, rejected. That is who I'm called to. As well, my other call is for me to live out my purpose and authenticity, not just by being a Black woman of trans experience, but actually being a Black woman who actually has a purpose that is transitional. You understand?
Yeah.
And so, and any time you use, and this is more, not more interfaith, because most of us in the Deep South grew up very Christianity. But any form of a sacred text, which in the Christian we call a Bible, anytime you use that to weaponize, is going to provide trauma and mental health in the long run. And when I say the long run, because most LGBTQ plus or queer individuals, they learn later on that's not what the text was intended. Or, they try to go back to their faith because it's part of their culture, it's part of their DNA, it's their hope and resilience that they get from it. In other words, they took the meat, the good meat, and kept the bad and what they didn't want, and scraped it off their table, and they continue to move and self-identify just as a spiritual person. But anytime we use the sacred text or the Bible as a weapon to justify discrimination, to justify hate, ostracizing, that is not the sacred text. The sacred text talks about and give us a roadmap how we are to live as a hand and feet of wholeness into the earth, to allow somebody to find a community where they too can be whole, where they can be seen through their visibility, through their gifts, through their own calling. And we as humans, being a representation of the divine, we are not judges. Okay. And so, that's what came to me when we were just having a quick dialogue. But, there are so many people, so many LGBTQ plus folks that are still yet spiritual, but it's very difficult to hold on to that faith, show up into a brick and mortar, show up into community, because, as clergy, and I'll call them out, come closer. Let me call you out, clergy, if you're listening. Okay, come closer. We got to start interpreting the scripture as such as a time as this, but stop adding to justify hate. Okay. Yes. Some would say that's evangelical Christian. Some would say, that's the red Christian. I mean, I can go down the list. The essence of us coming together is to forsake to assemble ourselves among believers. That is our commonality. And anytime you do anything to break that unity, then shame on those who say that they're a mouthpiece of the divine, creating an environment when in essence we are creating environments for folks, not like-minded folks, but believers to come together. And what is a believer? I believe that God created me and created me well, and the Bible say it was good, and I'm accepted through Jesus Christ from a Christianity standpoint. And I don't need anyone to tell me otherwise, because that is the revelation that I receive, because I have a relationship with the divine, not man. Do you understand? And so I'm just hoping, in the future that we have more allies and co-conspirators in these denominations, in these faith practices, that will just lead with love. And it's also my hope that those that are LGBTQ plus who have been hurt by the church or want to continue to hold on to their faith, that they find an environment that actually see them for their glorious, glorious humanity that was intended since day one. As the old church say, before the sperm met the egg, you were already intended
out of the mouths of babelings, sucklings.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah. So anyway, so and spirituality
I feel like we need to
is my
take up
passion.
an offering.
Well, just
you got some preach in you.
Yeah. I mean, because it's because if you think about it, it's I know this is an organic conversation. We're having couch conversation. That's why I'm on my couch. I'm comfortable. But cultural kind of perpetuate what we're seeing in the landscape within the LGBTQ plus community. We have evangelical Christians who are supporting legislation and bad rhetoric as if there is a issue with this community, and there is no issue. Do you hear what I'm saying? Yeah. So they're using spirituality and Christianity and all other faith practices as a way to justify. And you can't use that as a justification.
Well, I'm gonna go a little further than that. Like I have seen people in our community who remain in the church or still involved in religion, but they are still holding on to their own self-hate. And they go fuck 3 or 4 this weekend, but then turn around, feel convicted And then they're the same ones that get online and they're like, I'm just not part of the community. I just don't fit in with the gays. You don't fit in with the gays because you got so much shame in you and you believe the Lord still hates you, but you go to church and then you come out and then you spread that hate. You know, right now we're seeing something I personally have not seen in the community, and that is the division inside our own community as the outside world comes at us. And they're coming for us. Like, they're coming for our rights. They're coming for us in so many ways. But for the first time, I've seen the propaganda work on our own community and create a division that has never been there before. I have seen lesbians talk about they don't like gay boys, and I have seen, you know, the gay boys, they don't like the trans women. And you know, part of this, I think, is because there's this new movement that some of us are super uncomfortable with. Like some of this younger, I don't even know what it is. None of us do. But it's always been a part of the gay community. We've always had the bi girls that never actually were bi. They wanted to be a part of the community. We've always had, you know, the kids that didn't fit in that wanted to be in our community. And, you know, I've said a million times, you are welcome to sit at our table. Like, that's who we are. We welcome everybody, or we have in the past. Some of you cannot be the head of the table. Like, you are welcome here, but the struggle is not the same. And, you know, that's just.
No, I mean, you said a whole lot
right now.
Yeah, well, you said a whole lot that needs to be unpacked. So let me start from the beginning. Is that you do have individuals that are marginalized or that are part of the LGBTQ plus community that still frequent, you know, their faith practices, their buildings, their churches, however they choose to show up in their spirituality. And then you alluded to, but yet they don't want to be, you know, attached, or they feel condemned. And so forth. The first step is that, and especially primary to the Deep South, is that going to a church is cultural. And think about it. If you are removed from something that is part of your DNA, you wrestle with that. And so what happens is you wrestle enough that your cognitive mind can separate the two. And rather than bringing it all together in wholeness, as I would like to say, okay? And so I would like to really to affirm those that still attempts to show up if to the best of their ability. But I also hear the message of you're showing up, but then you're adopting what you're listening to. And it really affects you first because it's going through your ears first, and then your ears is leading with that, and then you segregate yourself, and you're part of the community. You're part of this LGBTQ plus. And then there's the other piece that why we just can't get along. You know why? You know why we just can't get along. You know, this is Pride Month, and you know I go to many a prides, and I see the diversity there. I see them hugging and loving and licking and kissing. You know, we get along
in person. But
person,
these keyboard warriors sitting behind, like there was somebody that I did a podcast with, and I did not air the podcast. Because at the end of the podcast, when I was editing it, I was not proud of my inauthenticity. I was not proud that I sat and didn't speak up when I knew the things that were being said went against my core values, and I got quiet. And I didn't stand up. And it was all of these like triggering statements that caused division. And I was a wuss. Like, I sat my ass back and nodded and smiled and was a people pleaser, and I didn't air. But this guy is. You got to
understand that there is a system that is in place, and I would like to, you know, inform the audience that the system is working, because you know. If we go back to even segregation because of race, black and white, there was a system in place to keep us divided. And even though we got laws that says that we are equal, we still live in a racism nation. Okay? If you think about that, they consider Black people, brown people, Jewish people, and so many other marginalized communities as different, okay? And they built systems around it in order for them not, and myself, not to have access or the privilege to seem equal to the non-melanin people, okay? Mm-hmm. But then we as the LGBTQ plus community, we are also, there is a system to keep us divided in the inside of our family, because regardless if we show up and we're on our best behavior, it really is the action behind when we're not in community. What are we doing to promote that we are a whole, there go that word again, we are a whole community. That means that in front of your face or not, I'm going to respect you as an individual or as persons. I'm going to advocate, because when I advocate for the community, I'm also advocating for me. But there is a system that has been built to keep us that are marginalized in division, so we can unfortunately debate, fight, debuckle within, which doesn't give us room to pay attention what's happening on the outside that's truly has affected us. That is the reason why our laws and our legislation has really been able to come in like a serpent and weasel its way in, because the system has programmed us to not even get along.
Well,
and so,
I can't speak
it's a little frustrating.
I can't speak for all marginalized communities, but in this community, and I think historically, in most marginalized communities, there has been a self-hatred that has caused even those in that community to find another group inside the community to say, yeah, I'm one of you, but you're less than me. You know?
I think that's natural, though. I think that's with any community.
Yes, I think that's the human.
Yeah, I mean, think about, and you know, I use a lot of spiritual antics because, again, that's truly what my call is. Think about if you grew up in a Christian denomination, how other Christian denominations talked about other Christian denominations.
Yeah.
Having the same King James Bible, having the same
once saved, always
saved. Having the same lectionary, you know, pretty much having the same order of service per se. But there is a division as it relates to denomination. Well, let's make that applicable to the conversation we're having as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community. We are a different facet that makes up one community. And we still, within our community, still have a lot to learn among our other siblings. Do you know that I have to still educate my lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer folks about the transgender community? I still have to wear that lash and still have to do that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. Is that if you have not been exposed, or if you haven't been willing to open up your horizon to be able to learn more of your siblings. Listen to me. We are your siblings. At the end of the day, I'm going to have your back when nobody else is going to have your back. Why? Because I can empathize what you're going through. Do you understand? Yeah. The hardest thing for me when I start living out my truth, I don't use the word that I transition or anything. When I recognize what my purpose was and I start living out the truth, this is what you get in front of you daily, right? But when I realized that I got hurt by my own Black community because I was shown, it was either I'm Black and I do what they do, but I can't be Black and I cannot be transgender at the same time. So you got to pick either or. Well, no, I picked both because they're homogenized. They can come together. But they didn't understand that. So for a period of time, I was not even welcome in my Black community because I chose to live out what my purpose and truth was. I don't need your permission to do that. Matter of fact, if you live out yours and I'm living out mine, then this wouldn't even be a challenge or an issue. But I'm grateful that, I withstood that. There was education that was needed. So that's what I mean about our community on the inside. When we make a clarion call for us to come together, of course we're going to come together because it's affecting all of us. But more importantly, what are you doing when we're not in a collective effort? When we're not drinking, when we're, and I'm just, going down the list, when we're not drinking, when we're not on any apps looking for our next social network, when we're not at a Pride event, when we're not at a LGBTQ
network.
plus event, social network, you get it? Social network,
it's a web. It's a web.
Yeah. But what are we truly doing? You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like that. I tell my church and those that I minister to, what prayers are you offering up when we're not in front of you? And if you're just praying for yourself, then that's being selfish. But if you're praying specifically for others, oftentimes we pray for others. We pray for others that are in our circle, our social network, things that are attached to our narrative. That is how we have to operate if we're truly going to see unity. It is a sad thing that we only celebrate Pride once a month. But, we got Pride 2.0, as I call it, in October. But we should be able to celebrate every day. I remember there was a time in a season where we used to identify people within the LGBTQ plus community, and to greet you and to know that we know that you're part of us. We'll be like, hey fam, what's going on, family? Do you remember that? Uh-huh. I know I'm old. I'm a grandmother of 3 now.
A grandmother.
I'm a grandmother of 3. My salvation and my truth has preserved me. That's what I like to say. But in essence, there is still more work to do. Now, let's talk about some happy stuff. I know that the last few years, just in, me traveling, even in the state of Alabama and other states, I have seen more of our community be more willing to show up, to learn from each other, because they understand that if I, as a transgender community, is under attack, you're right around the corner. It will affect you as well. In my leadership, I try to do cultural things. So, every year around our state legislature season, every time we get a bad discriminatory bill, I always tell other marginalized groups, years ago, the Black was on the chopping board. Our brown folks was on the chopping board. Now it's the LGBTQ on the chopping board. When they couldn't defeat marriage equality, they had to go back to the drawing board. And now they've been really focusing on the transgender community. Now we're on the chopping board. But don't get too caught up which genre of this marginalized community on the chopping board, because guess what? They're going to recycle and you can be next. That is the reason why I promote this message outside of just LGBTQ plus, but all marginalized individuals that can empathize with discrimination, racism, and you just go down the list that is not allowing us to thrive. We can come together.
Yes. But I've noticed one thing our community does is we see any community struggling and we go, okay, you're part of us. You're part of it. And they don't all want to be part of us. They don't all love us. They don't all agree with us. And I think one of the distractions that's happened in our community is we've tried to pick up every stray out there and put them in our back seat, and they don't want to ride. Like, there are groups that we have. I was at a Pride thing in Atlanta, and there was this big sign comparing, this was a few years ago. It was after all the 9/11 stuff. And they were showing this lady who, obviously, they were trying to appear as ISIS. And they were trying to go, which is worse? And then they had the Baptist with the Bible. And I'm like, what? Like, what are y'all trying to say? Like, neither one of those groups want to be a part of us. So I don't know why we're out fighting battles that we have so many battles with in our community, like for trans women right now, for trans men right now, for, I'm going to be honest.
Our youth.
Yes. And I have talked about it on here that I have witnessed racism in our community, like blatant, flat out racism inside the community from the white gay boys.
I'm about to say, for contextual purposes, When you say that you've experienced it, has it come to you? Because, you're part of my non-mailing group, honey, and I love you for
Well,
it.
but my husband is not.
But your husband's not. That's why,
Yes.
for context purposes.
So there is something that I never saw until I was close to it.
Yeah.
And through friends of mine that I have been in the room where things have been said that really just blew. I couldn't believe a person first had the balls to say it, but then to think it was coming from somebody in our community blows my mind.
Well, we're not a perfect community. One of the things that you mentioned was, we pick up all the strays, whether that's another marginalized, right, whether they want it or not, marginalized. But I want us to maybe to consider maybe thinking differently about that. And I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree. The way I do look at that statement you mentioned was, if we as the LGBTQ plus community are always being shunned out, doors are closing in our face and things like that, it would then behoove me as an I statement that I don't do that to other people, because I know what that hurt feels like. And so perhaps when I do see someone who is of a marginalized community that is being shunned out or that is being hurt, it almost makes it feel like it's ethical, my responsibility, because I know what that hurt feels like. Okay. Now, there's another message you said that I agree is that we can go, what they used to say about save a hoe. We can go and go save, everybody else, but we got to be mindful that we still have to do audit within our own primary marginalized community to figure out what is still needed, because those that we are bringing in, that's not part of the community, those that have become our allies and co-conspirators, that means that we now have more reinforcement to actually hone in if we can come together and talk about what our differences is. Listen, I know where you're located. We're in the same state, two different cities. But because we're in two different cities, our makeup and our need is going to be a lot different. It even is going to be a lot different because of the color of our skin, because of our gender, because of how much money, you know what I'm saying, that we bring in. And I want to just declare, I know you bring in some good money, because every time I say
she's rich, ain't she?
No, but what I'm alluding to is that we got to come together. We got to listen to other folks that are in our community. We got to stop superseding that my issue is either equivalent or greater than your issue. What we do is and this is a model that I did when I came to Alabama almost 5 years ago, and I'm a Southern Belle for real.
Are we falling for a distraction?
And that's where I was about, and that's exactly where I was about to go. When I got to this state, I was like, wow, there's a lot of potential work that can be done, and there's some amazing people doing some work, but I'm also seeing where there are some distractions. And for the life of me, I start having conversations with other leaders across the state. I run this entire state, so wherever, I drive and lay my head is my home at that time. And I kept asking him, how do we fix the distraction? How do we stay focused enough? And to be honest with you, there was no resolution. I mean, I can tell you all day, don't get mixed up with the distraction. That's just a distraction. But if you don't identify that it's a distraction, but later on, then it's to your demise, perhaps, if you don't recognize it sooner than later.
You gotta,
I like to say, sooner than after a while.
Somebody's got to have the backbone to call the distraction a distraction.
But that's true. But
because
there was
I know for my generation in the community, you and I, we lived through a very harmonious time in the community, that it was just all love and rainbows and glitters and shit. But this new thing, we're not used to this, because we didn't have this. But we also didn't have the pushback coming from government and the media and everybody else. Because I've told my son, I'm like, when Dad was in high school, being gay was cool. Melissa Etheridge was coming out. All these things were happening for us. And there was an acceptance that was happening around us. Because something has been fired up in the past few years. I swear it's propaganda. I swear it's coming from somewhere that we are all not comfortable saying it's coming from, just to divide us. We saw it in the 2016 election. Let's be real. Like, we thought they were going to have to cut our power grids off. They were going to have to cut our food supply off. And that's how they were going to get us. But no, all they had to do was post some shit on Facebook and we reposted it until the whole country was falling apart. From Facebook post.
Yeah.
And I feel like this has happened to us. Like,
and it is happening to us.
Yeah, we're falling for it.
But the truth of the matter is, out of all of that, we will always show up to talk about, and this is where I was alluding to, and this is how I had to change the mindset of people that I even work with, okay? Is we always show up. It's easy for us to talk about our differences.
Yeah.
But we never take the time to talk about our similarities. And when we can move to start talking about our similarities, we will find that we are more alike than we are different. I know that sounds very elementary, but we do not have those conversations within the LGBTQ plus community. When we do get together and have a town hall, it is usually a ratio of the majority and the less majority, and they're not speaking. There is no commonality they can identify because we don't sit long enough to talk about our similarities. One of the things that I appreciate about you, Brian, is that when I first met you a few years back, instantly it was like, when you found I was a clergy, and I was like, well, honey, I'm good Pentecostal. Look at the hair, Texas hair. And then you were able to open up and say, oh my goodness, I went to seminary. I grew up Pentecostal, and we start talking about those commonalities. And we start talking, and through those commonalities, we start sharing what really was distasteful and hurtful to us. And then we talked about how we reconcile. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So if we're not having that level of dialogue internal, don't expect those outside to support us in the way that we're needing. That is the reason why we have relabeled our ally. And listen, I love my allies. But we also have seen where allies, and they know no better because they want to support us. Going over and beyond, call that overcompensating your allyship. So we introduced a new word, co-conspirators, which means that you know how to leverage at the moment when I'm not present, how to speak for me, even how to use my people's first language. And when you've said enough and when you think you've accomplished, you've sat down. And when I've shown up, you're behind me and say, I got you. Now, I'm not saying that we are identifying two different support systems. What I am saying is that if we put in this community, in this LGBTQ plus community, if we continue to put forth more energy to our allies and co-conspirators, then therefore we're going to lose the fight because we are the ones that have the ammunition within the LGBTQ plus community, and we got to come together. We got to be in unity. We got to have these conversations, and we got to start talking more about similarities than we do just the differences, because the differences is what's keeping us divided.
What do you say that we can do as a community? It's Pride Month, to come together. Like, what's the answer to bring us together?
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. When I think about Pride, it is a celebratory opportunity. It's an opportunity to celebrate our visibility, celebrate the choices, celebrate our love, celebrate our authenticity. But it's also a time, because you mentioned earlier about perhaps the new generation. I want to call you old, but I'm sexy old. That's what I like to say. But
we're both Gen Xers.
You know what I'm saying? But we also can use this opportunity. We need more storytelling from our elders in the LGBTQ plus community. I'm not speaking about age, but those that have a service years of living out their truth. Our next generation needs to hear those stories. And if those stories are absent, then they don't have a blueprint to go on. Because some of the stuff that we're seeing, some of the fights and some of the things we're combating, we've seen this before. And the new generation, is not being perhaps a witness, because we're not reminding them what we had to go through in order to still survive where we're at now. So that's number one, is we need more storytellings to be shared. And we need to listen to our new generation. This is a whole new era. I cannot fathom. Now, listen, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 was a good year for me. But I promise you, I only can tell you highlights of it, because I've surpassed that age bracket. So that means the 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and I'll go all the way up to a 30. I ain't gonna say I'm a cougar now, but I'm just saying, you may have to remind me of some things, and I need to listen because times have changed. It just really has. And so we don't stay in one vehicle from the time we get our driver's permit and driver's license up until we retire. We don't do that. We get many of modes of transportation, different vehicles. Some of us start low end, and we're blessed to have an income to take us, and pay that high salary for what I call a name brand car. That is where we are, in our community. So we really can redefine and unpack this Pride Month and really use it as a time to celebrate us, but unify us in various ways that's going to keep us linked together, more education internal for us, because when, again, there is a clearing call and we need the army. I just had a preach moment. I'm sorry. It almost came out. But when we a clearing call and the army comes together of those that are marginalized, particularly LGBTQ plus folks, we are more equipped because we've had an opportunity to bond, to train with each other. And I know truly you'll have my back. Yeah. Military, they go to boot camp. They learn skills. When you are a veteran, and you're active duty, they teach you that you train together. It builds trust. It builds where visually, what your partner or community or social network movements are. So if I see you, Brian, moving a different way, I might need to show up and say, hey, what's going on? Or I might need to watch, but be there to love on you, to protect you, because I am noticing something, because I have been in training with you. We've had conversations, we've bonded, we've grown together. And more importantly, we trust each other.
And you told me years ago when we first met and we first started talking, and I told you I wanted to do something. And this podcast is birthed out of me realizing how many of us have trauma and how many of us are unhealed. And we've just never been given the tools to have good relationships, to have healthy lives, to not be addicted to validation outside of ourselves. And this started because I started my healing journey, and it's been going on for 15, 20 years of me like trying to figure out how to love myself, how to be the best version of me I can be. And, when this podcast started, it was to get those stories out there. It was because there's so many. Eckhart Tolle, I could go to sleep listening to him. I love his voice, but I needed to hear somebody say, this is how fucking bad it gets. This is how rough it is. This is how you tell yourself the truth. This is how you heal. And just like, I love being around you because you are blunt, to the point. She don't play.
Well, there's a testament that I have, and it's equivalent to yours. I know what it feels like to cry alone. I know what it feels like that I have to encourage myself. I don't care what pedestal people put me in leadership. At the end of the day, I can't take none of y'all home with me. So that means that there are opportunities where I have to find where my wholeness is at and how I have to continue to encourage myself, and then to surround myself. Listen, because we're part of this wonderful truth community does not mean that you're part of my social network, essentially, respectfully. What that means is I identify those that will give me the energy that I need. And I'm not going to say that's going to be the whole community. I'm not liked by everyone, and that's not my responsibility to be liked by everyone. Let me preach that to the world, okay?
It's not. Some of these children are draining me.
Right, but it's my responsibility how I show up and how I treat others, because the greatest reward is when I feel complete in what I did day to day through my actions. And again, that's filtered through the love that I have for humanity. It's nothing to do with my call. It has nothing to do with I work for HRC. It has nothing to do that I've been part of, of this advocacy world, for almost 30 years. It has everything to do with is that I don't want someone to go through what I went through. And this is just an example. I remember when my son told me that he was having his first child. We were just driving down the road and, listen to music and just abruptly, you're going to be a grandma. And I pressed on my brakes and I'm going to be honest with you. I was speechless, but what was going through my mind was, whew, at least I know, what his orientation is, perhaps at this time. Not saying that I reared my son to be inclusive because I want you to be happy like mama was happy. Okay. Mm-hmm. The reason why I bring that example up is because sometimes society, even within our own community, we have this perception that is not measurable. I want to say that. We have this perception that is not measurable. Your perception often is your opinion, and it may not be someone's truth. That means that when I don't want to accept your perception or what you call truth, how can we still rock together and think of commonalities? Or you respect where I'm at, I respect where you at, because through respect we can still move forward.
And this is Pride Month. Right. Nothing will bring your truth out like your kids will. I thought I knew all these things about myself, but when you're a parent, mine's 19 now. Okay. Holy shit. Well,
mine is 28, so I've been there.
I know I believe this, but do I believe this? It's them kids will put some gray on. I agree.
But, overall, we need to get more storytelling out from both, from all generations. We need to listen to our emerging and new generation, but we also need their patience to also hear from us as well, because some of us has really lived this thing out. And some of us carry a smile because we survived some of the attacks that we are even seeing today. The other piece is that are we truly building authentic community engagement?
Yes.
You did this podcast because you want to create a way for listeners to feel if you don't have a community or if there's topics that are not being shared. Can you imagine how this podcast is getting into rural areas that don't have access like us in the urban area?
Yes.
Those are meaningful community engagement tools, okay? And if one thing COVID taught us, technology is the biggest tool that we have in this season and moving forward. Then the other piece is that let's be good to one another. And none of this I'm saying that to correct anyone. I am saying what I think is going to take us as an LGBTQ plus community to our next dimension. If we're, again, my God, if we're going to be the army to show society who truly are outside looking in at our truth, when we come together, they will be unveiled and be able to see the truth that we're giving, and then they will tag on. Do you know how many people that we inspire that's not LGBTQ plus in order for them to live out their choices? Those are the things that we need to speak about. We need to pat ourselves on the back. There is and the last piece I'll say before I give it to you, I learned this year every year I give myself a theme for the work that I do in my advocacy. This year was reimagine what a win looks like and feel like. Even if it feels like you lost a fight, the perception is there is still something that can be good that you can identify because it didn't kill you. You're still breathing. You heard what I'm saying? Yeah. And so just those little tweaks can kind of assist us to bring some balance internally to our community, to our yoking, so folks that are outside looking in don't see that we are a discourse community, but we are a community as one. That's where true healing would happen. That's where we are able to love and support our genres of our community. Even if we're still being educated, we can still show up. There is nothing you need to do in order to administer love and acceptance, but to remember your own story when you receive love and acceptance. And I would like to say on a daily basis of people you show up to, then offer that to other people as well.
Yes. I love having this conversation with you. I think we needed this for Pride because everybody's been so wrapped up in the hot dog eating contest and everything else that comes with Pride. Come on. But we needed this from Mama to tell these kids to get along and just to remind us that we are a family and we do love each other. And I'm going to ask you right now, like you say we need these stories. I need to have you back and I want to hear Camarion's story.
Ooh, I would love to do that.
We've heard you preach now. We've heard.
Yeah. I would love to tell you how I got to this particular place. So, let's do this sooner than after a while, as I like to say. Let's go ahead and link that because I am still sometimes amazed. I cry, often when I'm thinking about where I started, where I could be, where people could become visiting at a memorial site, to where I am now. And there is a story. I call it my testimony, but there is a story that you're talking about a Black woman of trans experience from the Deep South who grew up in the hardest, I believe, Christian denomination, which is Pentecostal, who has an identical twin brother who became a teen parent and who's now at their 14th history making since doing advocacy, because I choose to live out my truth and I choose to give love no matter where, as I like to say, my pinky toe steps into the place. So I would love to share that story, to the world.
I think the kids need to hear it. I think we all need to hear it. Just because I've seen your work, I've seen your passion, but I would like to know where all that comes from and how you continue to have this joy. After everything. So
I promise the world didn't give it to me. As the old church would say, the world didn't give it to me and the world can't take it away. It really is a wholeness. And I want to continue saying that message to your listeners. It is something about when you can diagnose your own self and know that you're whole. I'm not perfect, but I'm whole enough where my skin has gotten so tight that even when when something comes my way to offend it, I can stop and process and say, they really don't know who I am. They really didn't mean to say that. Because if I respond,
you can only connect to the world as deeply as you can connect to yourself.
That is very true.
If you can't be authentic, if you can't tell the truth to yourself, if you can't look in the mirror and tell yourself first where you were wrong, what you need to work on, and not just where you were wrong, but be able to praise yourself in the mirror and see the good in yourself. You're not going to see the good in the world if you can't see the good in the mirror. If you can't connect with yourself, you cannot connect to others.
Yeah. And that's all we're saying with Pride. This is a season of connectability. And when we get into July and August and September, the remaining of the year, let's continue to live out our pride. And whatever that might look like in your life,
that's going to be a trial when the weather gets that hot.
Listen, but live it out, because someone is still trying to learn how to live out theirs. Yeah. And they live sometimes vicariously when we truly have lived out our pride. And it's not just for show and fashion. It's because we're presenting ourselves whole into a world that is trying to erase us. And we show up and say, yep, we're still here. Because it was by design, it was by appointment that we were intended to be here. And again, I'll continue saying, if those outside looking in can just get a glimpse or feel what our strength is, we will move to our next dimension in this country. I promise you, we will. With all of the attacks that's trying to minimize us and erase us, you need us. We are the harvest. And guess what? It's plentiful. And there are some wheat that's growing with the tear. You heard what I'm saying? And we as a community, we stay bound together. That is what protects us. That is what keeps us and grow us. That's what puts a shield around our community when these attacks come. But if the inside home can exhibit that, then what do you think the world is looking at? And that's where the system then comes in and divides us. And so this has been a great conversation. I wish we had more time.
We're going to do it again, and we're going to get into you. I want to say to you, you are my sister. I love you. And I am honored that you took the time today. I know you have a busy schedule. I also want to say happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
And let's do this again soon, because I want to share with all the listeners like your backstory and everything that brought you to this point. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share with your friends and family. Also, if you have comments, questions, or maybe you want to share your story, you can email me at raginghardonpodcast@gmail.com.